Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Luvis with the Chamber for Greater Chapel Hill-Carrboro, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Economic Outlook Forum. This is our first of 4 forums this year as part of the 2022 Critical Issues series. And today we have, you're going to receive timely information on the current performance and future predictions of our national, state, regional, and local economy. We have 2 speakers for you today who will share their knowledge and expertise and give you what you need to know to make sense of this very complicated time. Before we get to the program, a few housekeeping items. First, as far as staffing for today's Zoom discussion, I'll serve as your host, and our Chamber President and CEO, Aaron Nelson, will moderate the discussion, and he's going to be a presenter. My colleague, Mackenzie Reinhold, is on technology and available through chat if you need any support. And my colleague, Ori St. Germain, is on slides, and I'm his backup on that as well. And by the way, Ori coordinates our social media. So we invite you to follow the conversation online and share your takeaways with hashtag CHC Critical Issues, which stands for Chapel Hill Chamber Critical Issues. If you have any questions or comments or your ahas during the forum, and I know you will, go ahead and post them below in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll help tee up our questions and comments for the discussion period. Now, as you probably noticed, your line was muted when you joined this meeting, and we ask that you remain muted. But if you feel comfortable, please keep your video on. We love to see your smiling faces. Today's discussion, as you know, will be recorded, and we're going to share it through our YouTube channel. So we'll send you the link in our follow-up email over the next couple of days. This forum, like many of our forums, is free for Chamber members. If you're not a Chamber member, but you're interested in learning more, drop a note in the chat box, and a Chamber staff member will be sure to follow up with you. Now, today's forum and the entire 2022 Critical Issues series is coordinated by the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, and the chair of the committee, Betsy Brucker-Harris, would like to bring you welcome. Betsy is the IT project coordinator for Armacell, which is a global company that invented flexible foam, and they manufacture innovative technical insulation solutions that conserve energy and make a positive difference. Armacell has 300 patents, 3,000 employees, and 24 facilities around the world, including their head office for the Americas in Chapel Hill and a manufacturing facility in Mebane. Betsy?
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the 24 volunteers who serve on the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this Economic Outlook Forum, For those who are new to our events, you should know that we are a learning community. You may be tempted to just sit back and relax, but we want you to lean in, pose questions in the chat, and engage in our discussion. It's a joy for me to serve on the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee and to help coordinate these forums. In addition to the forums, our committee convenes every month to discuss policy matters and coordinate the Chamber's collective advocacy on behalf of the local business community. We focus on retaining, recruiting, and growing employers, developing a talented workforce, improving the business climate and regulatory environment, and building and maintaining infrastructure. If you're interested in learning more and getting involved, I encourage you to let me or Katie know in the chat. And with that, I hope you enjoy the program. Katie, back to you.
Thanks, Betsy. Now it's my pleasure to recognize our sponsors whose support makes today's forum and the entire series possible. First, Chapel Hill Media Group, including 97.9 The Hill and chapelboro.com. 97.9 The Hill WCHL is your local radio station and Chapel Hill's oldest, most reliable broadcaster. The station, which is 97.9 FM and 1360 AM, features fantastic programming for the Greater Chapel Hill-Carrboro region, including local news, sports, talk shows, alternative music, and CBS News reports. You can find all that and more on chapelboro.com, your daily local news source. Tune in later today at 4:30. You're going to hear our presenters, Dr. Michael Walden and Chamber President and CEO Aaron Nelson, discuss their top takeaways from today's forum with 97.9 News Director Bright McConnell on his daily radio show called News on the Hill. All right, so next up is Durham Tech. Durham Tech is the community college that serves our workforce needs here in Orange County. They have a beautiful 20-acre, 40,000 square foot campus centrally located in Orange County near Hillsborough. Today, we have a video message from 2 of their students, Carlos and Simi, who are both paramedic students at the Orange County campus. They've recorded a special video message for you, which will give you a sense of the caliber of the programs and students at at Durham Tech at the Orange County campus. Now, fingers crossed, this technology will work. I'm going to turn to Ori and Mackenzie to roll the tape, and if it doesn't work, we'll bring it in at the end.
My name is Carlos. I am enrolled in the paramedic program at Durham Tech at the Orange County campus. I'm originally from Orange County, and I'm also employed for Orange County EMS, which is one of the reasons why I chose to take this program here. I took my EMT here as well, and it's just, I've seen how this program has produced some of the best medics I know. So I just had to do it myself and keep serving my community.
Hi, my name is Simeon Holmes. I am a current paramedic student at Durham Tech. I also am an EMT for Orange County currently, and I chose the Durham Tech program at Orange County campus because I've heard so much about it. I took my EMT, the certification here, and I've been able to learn from all of the professors and teachers, and they've produced some of the best medics and EMTs in the county, so that's one of the big reasons why I chose Orange County. And also, I think this would be a great preparation for what I do in the future. That's including PA school, possibly med school, and I think this paramedic program will prepare me very well for those opportunities.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love it. It's great to see the students themselves. Thanks, Durham Tech, for teeing up that video for us. Next up is SurfPro. SurfPro of South Durham and Orange County is a locally owned and operated business that provides commercial and residential fire and water cleanup and restoration services, as well as biohazard, trauma, and mold remediation services. ServPro is there when you need them with 24/7 emergency services. They're fast, highly trained, and use advanced technology tools and equipment. With us today is ServPro's business development representative, Jim McNeely. Jim, good to see you. Please bring welcome.
Thank you, Katie. The ServPro of South Durham and Orange County, your local restoration, mitigation, cleaning, and construction specialist, is proud to sponsor the Critical Issues series in conjunction with the Chamber. ServPro prides itself on being faster to any disaster. Whether it's your home or your business that has a burst pipe, a fire experiences a fire, needs mold remediation, or specialty cleaning, we are there to make it like it never even happened. The essential topics presented in the Critical Issue series, presented by experts in their field, fortify and enhance the thriving business community that makes Chapel Hill-Carrboro and the surrounding areas great. As we move forward, ServPro of South Durham and Orange County is committed to giving back and supporting our neighbor businesses so that we can excel in the months and years to come. We thank the Chamber and its presenters for their diligence, preparation, and hard work, and welcome all those that are in attendance here today. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Jim, and thank you for your support of today's event. Finally, the Small Business and Technology Development Center, known as the SBTDC. The SBTDC is a network of centers with professional staff who provide free and confidential business counseling for small and mid-sized businesses. The SBTDC is an extension program of the UNC system, funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. So there's an SBTDC center at each of our UNC campuses, including one here in Chapel Hill and another in Durham at NC Central. We're so delighted to have the SBTDC as a supporting sponsor of this year's Critical Issues series. With us today is the SBTDC Regional Director, Neil McTighe. Neil, great to have you. Please bring welcome.
Good morning, Katie, and good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here. As Katie said, my name is Neil McTighe. I'm with the Regional Director of the Central Carolina region of the North Carolina Small Business and Technology Development Center. I lead a really talented team of business counselors that are here to serve businesses like yours. Most of our services are free of charge. All of our services are confidential. And we serve businesses in Alamance, Chatham, Durham, Lee, Orange, and Person counties. And as Katie mentioned, we have offices at both North Carolina Central University and right here at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The SBTDC is, a business and technology extension program funded through an agreement with the SBA. And you can learn more about us at sbtdc.org. And that's also the place, if you'd like to get some counseling, to submit a request for counseling. So we're thrilled to be here. We love learning from you all and excited for a great day. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Neil. Great job. So friendly reminder, if you or any business owner you know needs some support, this is an awesome resource. All right, now onto the program. As I mentioned before, Chamber President and CEO Aaron Nelson will moderate our discussion today as well as present. Aaron's led the Chamber for more than 20 years. He's a Carolina grad, and he's always quick with a joke or an insightful comment. Aaron, take it away.
I never know whether you're asking for a joke or an insightful comment when you introduce me that way. We'll see how I can perform today's session. It's good to see you all in this session. This is the event that I look forward to most each year. So we're going to have two segments today. The first is going to be Dr. Michael Walden. He's going to share his forecast for our national, state, and regional economy. I'll then moderate some questions for Dr. Walden following his presentation. And then in the second segment, I'm going to present a quick overview of the findings that we have gathered from our local economic conditions survey. We've deployed the same survey out to our membership for almost 15 years now. And I look forward to reporting to you what folks are saying, what they're projecting for their local businesses in this community in February of 2022. So let's gonna get to it. Our first segment speaker is back by popular demand. He retired from the university, but that did not change our interest in having him here, and we are grateful that he is with us again. Dr. Michael Walden is the William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor Emeritus at North Carolina State University, and he is president of Walden Economic Consulting. During his 43 years on the faculty at North Carolina State, Dr. Walden became recognized as an expert on the state economy and public policy. He's the author of 12 books, over 300 articles and reports. He's made more than 3,000 personal appearances and presentations. He's a frequent contributor to national and state media, continues to write a bi-weekly newspaper column. He has won numerous awards, including 2 Champion Tuck Awards for Excellence in Broadcasting. The UNC Board of Governors gave him an award for Excellence in Public Service, the Holiday Medal for Excellence from North Carolina State University, and the Order of the Longleaf Pine. We'll ask him if he can tell us the toast as a trivia quiz for all Longleaf Pine. Actually, I won't do that to you. You don't have to quickly Google it. He's an author of books that aren't always about the economy. His newest books, Real Solutions, and one's called Real Solutions. The other one is Disunia, a political thriller. His upcoming book, Relaunch, How Families Can Be Renewed and the American Dream Revived in the New Independent Lifestyle of the Post-Pandemic Economy. Did your deal with Random House include like a per word in the title advance, maybe? It's going to be published this year, well, this month, right? You'll have to let us know how that is going. So Dr. Walden, we are honored to have you with us here again. Welcome, and we're looking forward to your insights.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you, Katie, and thanks to the Chamber for inviting me again. I thoroughly enjoy this, and I've said this many times to groups I've spoken over the last couple months. Hopefully, next time we'll be seeing each other together. I have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Ori, you're going to handle the slides, so go to the next slide. 3 major topics I want to cover: the economy is going to continue to improve. How are we paying for the massive federal spending that occurred during the pandemic, and how would the economy adjust after the pandemic? Next slide, Ori. This is a picture that just shows you the trajectory of the economy over the last 3 years. You can see in 2020, the second quarter, the big dip there. These are GDP numbers, gross domestic product, US, North Carolina. The big dip in the second quarter, that was your COVID-19 recession. We actually have that officially declared. It was a 2-month recession. It was a rather short recession. The recovery was fueled by the fact that the curves became flatter. You recall the deaths, cases, et cetera. We made progress in flattening those. That allowed the restrictions on the economy to be loosened. We also had the first kick in of the massive federal stimulus programs. And we've had economic growth since then, not always at the same pace. Every time we've had a new variant, like at the end of 2021, we've seen some flattening of that growth, but we see it continuing. We don't yet have a fourth quarter 2021 for North Carolina, so that's why that red line cuts off. Next slide. If you look at the various sectors in the economy, major sectors, this is GDP as a percent of pre-pandemic GDP. Most of them are back, almost back to full. In fact, some sectors are well above. Information or tech sector, almost 20% above. Of course, the tech sector has actually been able to gain some traction due to the changes like we're using right here, Zoom, other technologies. Professional services are 14% above pre-pandemic. Even restaurants and hotels, these are North Carolina numbers. I think that would be surprising many. In terms of revenues or production, restaurant and hotels are actually fully recovered. Their problem is labor. If you go to the right-hand side at the bottom, you see two sectors that are still lagging, 6% under: transportation and warehousing. Primarily the problem there is not the services, the demand for the services, it's finding people to do those services. And then personal services, those are businesses where there's a lot of close personal contact. I think a lot of people are still shying away from that, although I think that's going to recover. Next slide. If we look at measures of the economic recovery in regions of our state, these are employment numbers. Again, current employment numbers. This is December, the latest month we have data for North Carolina, as a percent of pre-pandemic employment, which is February 2020 I'm using. You can see that most regions of our state are back, close to back, or fully back. Raleigh, Cary, 100%. Where are you? I'm looking. Yeah. Durham, Chapel Hill, fully back. A couple regions that are lagging. Asheville still down about 3%, although it's coming back. Greensboro, High Point also down 96%. I'm not down. They're 4% off pre-pandemic. They're going to come back. Of course, you know about the big economic development announcements there. So pretty good evidence here that the economy has been coming back. Next slide. Now, the job market. Big concern. I get the most questions. Well, actually, I'm getting more questions now about inflation, but clearly the job market. Now, if you look at the unemployment rate, which is the left-hand slide, you think, what's the problem in the job market? Yeah, we had a big jump in unemployment during the pandemic's recession in the spring of 2020, but the unemployment rate has fallen just about back to where it was pre-pandemic. We're only a couple tenths of a percentage point above where we were pre-pandemic. So you might look at this and say, what's the problem? Well, the problem is not that people who are wanting jobs can't find them. The problem is that we don't have many people in the labor force who either want to work or are looking for work. That's reflected in the right-hand slide, which measures something economists call labor force participation, which is simply the percentage of adults who are either employed or looking for work. Again, if you go to the left-hand side of that slide, you can see we had a big drop during the pandemic's recession, recovery. But right now, latest data is December. Right now, you can see those numbers both at the national level and in North Carolina are below where they were pre-pandemic. We've not yet fully recovered in terms of labor force participation. To put a number on this, if we had the same labor force participation in North Carolina now as we had pre-pandemic, there would be 170,000 more people in North Carolina either employed or looking for work. So that's the best metric right now for those of you who want to track this that signifies what's going on in terms of the labor shortage. Next slide. Why are many people, those 170,000 people hanging back and not looking for work? A number of factors here. Obviously, excuse me, the first would be continued worry over COVID. Hopefully as things improve, that'll diminish. If you're a family with young children, you face big challenges, uncertainty about school schedules, reduced availability of childcare, because childcare has been one of those sectors that's been having trouble finding workers. What this means is that parents who want to work or had jobs, maybe they can't go back to work because they need someone at home, especially if they have young children. So that's been a problem. We've had massive federal stimulus money from federal government during the last 3 years. I'll talk more about that in a moment. There have been numerous studies. In fact, I just got one this week from the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is probably the premier think tank that looks at economic issues. We do have some evidence that the size of this help did deter some people from going back to work as soon as they could have. Now that's going away because a lot of these programs have been gone away. The stimulus checks are no longer, child payments are no longer, additional job benefits are no longer. But we do think that the massive help did play some impact, not the dominant impact, but some impact. And then the last factor is one that I went through, retirement. I think what the pandemic did to many people who were close to retirement or could retire, I had 43 years in an NC State, so I had long passed the time when I could have retired. The pandemic and COVID made people like me who are in their 70s think about the future. How do I want to spend my time if I've only got limited time, 15, 20 years of good life ahead of me? There are a lot of people who also were concerned about what the work environment would be back at work. Would they see people like they used to? Would they have to do a lot of work remotely? So retirements actually spiked in both 2020 and 2021. Now, one issue or one question here is, will some of those folks, when things get back to some semblance of normalcy, will some of those folks who retired unretire? And so that's something to watch. But that's been a big deal in terms of reducing the labor force, the number of retirements that we've seen. Next slide. Now, we've also had, besides a labor shortage, I like to call it, we've also had a labor reallocation. That is to say, yes, businesses that are having trouble finding workers, it's due to the fact that, again, in North Carolina, we have 170,000 fewer people who are in the labor market, but it's also been due to the fact that many workers have been able to upskill themselves during the pandemic. That is, they took the time, particularly in 2020, when there were the federal financial programs that would support them, they took the time to get new skills, acquire new skills. Maybe going to some classes, maybe getting those classes online, whatever. And a lot of these were young people. And what's happened, therefore, is when they've come back in the labor market, instead of going maybe back to that minimum wage job, they've been able to go to a job with higher pay. And as I showed you, tech sector has widely expanded, professional services have expanded, and administrative help for professional services has dramatically expanded. So we've had a reallocation of workers in the labor market besides just a labor shortage. Next slide. Now, if you are a business, and most of you are business people and no business people, our sponsors, a couple of our sponsors are business people. If you're having trouble finding workers, what do you do? Well, here are 3 suggestions, and they're all very obvious. First, try to attract people with higher pay and benefit or higher benefits. That's a tough thing to do because usually for especially small business, if you pay your workers more, you're going to have to pass that on to your customers. And what I would suggest in that case, if you do that, is let your customers know why your prices have gone up. Let them know that it's due to the fact you're having to pay more for labor. You're also having to pay more for a lot of your inputs. Let customers know. And I think many people would be surprised how understanding customers would be. Second suggestion is try to substitute technology and automation for workers. Now, that's easier said than done. It's more of a long run thing. But some fast food restaurants, for example, if you go to fast food restaurants, you've seen this already at work, where instead of going up to a counter to order, you go to a big electronic panel and you order there digitally. And so that allows that restaurant to cut back at least on some of their workers. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in a lot of businesses. And then the final thing is try to look at your work staff you have and see if you can rearrange what people do in order to get more productivity. Sometimes managers and owners are too busy with other things when times are good to really look at how they do things. And sometimes they'd be surprised at how much more productivity they can get if they just rearrange the task. Next slide. I do think that we're going to see the labor availability improve over time. I do think that barring another major outbreak of a new variant, we're already talking about a new variant, I do think some of those issues that I talked about earlier that are keeping a lot of people out of labor market, those issues will begin to ease. Next slide. When I stop a minute, I'm taking a sip of coffee. Let me talk a little bit about the massive federal assistance I've already alluded to, because this is going to feed in one of the big issues that we're facing right now. Federal government has never stepped up as big as they did with the COVID-19 attack and the recession that ensued. The federal government usually, going back to the 1930s, does come up and does step up when there's a recession, provides help to people, relief to businesses, et cetera. That's standard operating procedure. Doesn't matter what administration, Republican or Democrats in charge. But this time around, federal government has stepped up big. We have never seen the kind of large programs the federal government has implemented over the last 3 years. The total is about $5.5 trillion. To give you some context, When President Obama was elected in 2008 and he came in office in 2009, and one of the first things he wanted to do was craft a stimulus package for the economy, but he told his advisors, keep the price tag under 1 trillion. And if you recall, I think that price tag came in at around 800 billion, I'm sorry. Clearly we've blown past that. So we've never had the massive amount of help. And I think the reason for this, if I can posit an explanation, is we were in uncharted territory. All the recessions that I've lived through, and the vast majority of recessions we've had in our country, tend to occur in due to financial reasons, higher oil prices, problems with credit, overindulgence in the stock market. They're all financial reasons, and so we can see that, and there's sort of a playbook, and you sort of know how those things are going to work out. It's been 100 years, over 100 years now, since we've had a pandemic the size of the COVID-19 recession, or COVID-19. You have to go back to the Spanish flu of 1917 and 1919. And then federal government did nothing, virtually, let the economy just find its way. So I think going into this, we didn't know where this was going to take us. We didn't know how bad COVID would be, what it would do to the economy. And we wanted to have an economy left, and we wanted to have households left and businesses left when it came out of this. So I think our federal, and all this money has come from the federal government. I think our federal decision makers, and again, this spans two different administrations. I think they wanted to err on the high side. And you can go back and look at these programs and say, you know, they should have been more targeted. A lot of people got assistance that maybe didn't, got stimulus checks, they didn't really need it. We should have targeted at the people who really need. I get all that, but I think our decision makers wanted to do this fast, because once they get into the details and start debate, that holds things up. So that's my explanation for why we've spent this massive amount of money. Next slide. And you can see the impact. I'm just showing you one impact. Typically you're looking at personal income paths, and the ups and downs are due to seasonality, but you can see in both these cases, the federal and the country on the left, North Carolina on the right, over the last 3 years during the pandemic, personal income has trended upward. Typically during recessions, not typically, always during recessions, you'd see personal income trend downward. Another indicator of how important this money has been is in 2020, the last year we have full data, the poverty rate in the country actually went down rather than up. You think of just the reverse, again, COVID-19 recession. So this aid has been massive. And you can see the impact of it in the numbers. Next slide. Let's go on to the next slide, Ori. And let's go one more. Okay. I want to detour just a little bit to talk a wee bit about the Federal Reserve, a little lesson on the Federal Reserve. Many of you are in financial services and business know about the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve is a federal institution. It's the central bank of the US. It is not a line department under the president. It doesn't have to go to Congress for money. It's very independent, has its own source of money through member banks. The Federal Reserve is very, very powerful. It has two main powers, or it has regulatory power over banks, and secondly, it has been given a mandate to try to keep the economy moving in a fairly even way. That is, try to work out the ups and downs in the economy. That is, try to moderate recessions, but also moderate expansions. Try to keep the economy growing smoothly, because the notion is that when things are smooth and predictable, that's good for business. That's good for households. The Federal Reserve has two main powers that they can employ to do this. One is their control over interest rates. They don't directly control interest rates you and I pay, but they influence them heavily through a rate they do control called the federal funds rate. If they want to stimulate the economy, if we're in a recession, they want to stimulate the economy, they lower that rate. If they want to slow down the economy, they increase that rate. You can see from the slide on the left-hand side, they have lowered the rate over the past 2 years, from 2.5% in 2019 to about effectively zero right now. The second power they have, which is illustrated on the right-hand side, is the Federal Reserve has the ability to make cash, produce money. And they put that into the economy by buying investments, typically treasury securities. So that $5.5 trillion that the federal government has allocated for COVID, that you saw previously, that's all been borrowed, but the majority of it's been borrowed, sold to the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve pays for its purchases by just making up money, printing money. The old days, it was a printing press. Today, it's all digital. And so you can see this. And in fact, go to the next slide, Ori. The money supply in the country has gone up 85% since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, this has been good because, again, it's helped us, it's helped households, it's helped businesses. Aaron mentioned the PPP. That was a big program for businesses. It's helped institutions like governments and school districts and hospitals, et cetera, get through this pandemic. But we're now seeing the downside of this with the next slide, Ori. In fact, go to the next slide, I'm sorry. With what? Inflation. And I'll get to the reasoning in a minute. Inflation is now the number when people are asked what's their top economic issue. Actually, I think it's what their top issue is, period. It's now inflation. Inflation is the top issue in the country. And it's easy to see why. Number one, it has spiked very rapidly. We had an inflation rate of 1% in 2020. This is an annual rate, and it's now up to 7.5%, the latest reading. So it's gone up very, very rapidly. That's one reason. Second reason is people know that inflation was actually a non-issue for most of the 21st century. In fact, in the 21st century, up until 2020, the inflation rate only got higher than 3% a year, three times. Most years it was 1 or 2%. I don't go back for the entire 21st century, but you can see from 2014 to 2020, very, very mild inflation rate. So that's a second shock. People who are younger, I'm 71 years old, people who are in their 20s or 30s, they've never seen inflation like we're having now. And then thirdly, what does inflation do? Well, it does lots of things, but the main thing it does is it reduces people's standard of living. Because unless your income is going up to keep pace with inflation, you're able to buy less than you did previously. So in the last year, you would have had to have had an income increase of 7.5% in order for your standard of living to stay level. For most people, that vast majority of people, that didn't happen. So people intuitively know this pushes back their standard of living. So it's very easy to understand why inflation right now is the top issue in the country. Next slide. Now, the big question is why? What happened? What happened all of a sudden to cause inflation to go up? Well, in economics, everything is supply and demand. We break all issues down into supply and demand. And both supply forces and demand forces have been pushing us toward higher inflation. How so? Well, let's look at the supply push first. You've heard of the supply chain issues. Those are real, they're international, they're not going away anytime soon. The problem is that due to COVID, due to labor shortages, due to other disruptions, where businesses are not able to get as many products, mainly products, but it can be services too in terms of labor supply, available for consumers. There's been some improvement recently, but it's not going to go anytime soon. So that's hurting us on the supply side. We just don't have as much to buy. And on the demand side, people are trying to buy. People have cash to spend. I told you the poverty rate went down in 2020. Savings rates have never been higher, and people are now pulling down on those savings rates. People are now wanting to get out and go back to normal and spend. So people are trying to spend, but they're not finding as many things to spend that money on. But what that means is of the products and services that are out there, each of them are more valuable, so prices go up. So we're getting hit. Inflation is being pushed by both sides, the demand side and the supply side. And most economists think that this is not going to go away anytime soon. I tend to think we're probably near the top. 7.5% is probably near the top. I've seen some economists say we might get close to 10. So again, a forecast is a forecast. I do think the inflation rate will moderate at some point this year, but we're not going to get back to 1 or 2% anytime soon. So I think it's going to remain an issue. Next slide. Let's actually go next slide. Now, what can the federal government do about this? And this is very important because there are going to be some actions, and I think they're going to affect the economy. The federal government, the controlling inflation is really out of the hands of the president and the Congress. For example, I've had some people say, well, Walden, why doesn't just President Biden just impose price controls? just say we can't have prices go up more than this. We tried that. President Nixon tried that 45 years ago. It was a disaster. There was fraud. It caused shortages. It actually exacerbated it. And so it actually, if you think of a kettle and the inflation rate is from that water boiling underneath the kettle, the wage and price controls sort of put a lid on the kettle, but it was only temporary. Once the lid came off, it exploded. And in fact, after the Nixon wage and price controls came off, the inflation rate tripled. So eventually, to control inflation, to reduce inflation, it's really in the hands of the Federal Reserve. Now, the person you're looking at, and many of you who are older maybe remember him. I remember him. I was a professional economist during this time. Is a guy named Paul Volcker. Paul Volcker, first of all, stood out in a crowd. 6'7", constantly had a cigar in his fingers, smoking. When he testified before Congress, the smoke was swirling around his face. He was brought in by President Carter, retained by President Reagan, and was told, look, your job is to reduce the inflation rate. In those days, inflation got up to almost 13.5% in 1 year. Volcker did this by going back to those tools that I talked about. He raised interest rates and he pulled cash out of the economy. Within 3 years, he got the inflation rate from 13.5% down to 3%. The problem was within those 3 years, we had 2 recessions. So that's the danger of this kind of policy. And the Federal Reserve the current Federal Reserve Governor Jay Powell has said they are now going to start raising interest rates. They are now going to start pulling cash out of the economy, and they'll start this next month. Watch that. This is very, very important. I think this is the issue for the year, the change in policy of the Federal Reserve. Now you might say, well, can't they do it precisely to exactly get the inflation rate down without causing a recession? No, not necessarily. This is a social science, economics. It's not a physical science where if you do A, you know you're going to get B. In the social science, you do A, you know you're going to get maybe close to B, but you never know how close you're going to get. So this is going to be the challenge, I think, for 2022 in the economy. Can the Federal Reserve pull off the very difficult task of reducing the inflation rate, slowing the economy down, which is what they want to do, but not slowing it down so much that they go into a recession? That's really what we all have to watch, whether you're a consumer, a business, a government official, whatever. Next slide. All right, so what are my forecasts? And these forecasts, I mean, they're really the same for the nation, the state, and our locality here. I've got 3. I've got 3. The optimistic forecast is that Federal Reserve is able to pull off that hat trick, and the virus becomes a nuisance, and we actually see economic growth accelerate, and you can see that with the red line. The middle forecast is that the Federal Reserve is able to pull off the hat trick of slower growth, reducing inflation without a recession, but the virus is not quite beaten. Maybe we get a new variant, Omicron 2 is being talked about, so we have to keep some restrictions on. So the economy does grow, but not quite as fast as in scenario 1. Scenario 3 is the worst of the 3 scenarios. The Federal Reserve is not able to pull off the hat trick. We do have a short recession at the end of the year. You can see that by the green line going down. It is short-lived, and then we start growing, but obviously we end up the year or begin 2023 at a much lower rate of economic activity than we did with the other scenarios. So this is the big deal, I think, for 2022. I think the attention hopefully is going to be able to turn away from the virus as the driver of our economy, and now it's going to be in terms of the Federal Reserve driving the economy, and their intent is to try to reduce the inflation rate without damaging the economy. All right, next slide, Ori. All right, I want to talk about some long-run, I got a few minutes, some long-run impacts of the pandemic, and I talked with you about these before, so some of this is repetition, but I do think it's important because the post-pandemic economy, we can already see it's going to be different than where we were pre-pandemic. Next slide, Ori. First is labor market disruption. And this would have happened even without the pandemic, but I think the pandemic has sped it along. We are in, many say, a shift in our economy. Some call it the fourth economic revolution. Some call it the cloud revolution, whatever. I mean, there are things going on primarily in technology that are really dramatically shaping up what we do, how we do it, what kind of workers we need. So we're going to have, I think, a lot of flux in our job market. And the policy implication of this is we're going to have our institutions, our community colleges, our four-year colleges, our programs that we operate in concert with businesses ready to handle that, because I think we're going to have more people becoming available. They're going to lose their job, or their jobs aren't going to be as plentiful in what they're doing, because what they're doing is now going to be done by technology, but there are going to be other jobs created. And we need to have quick, proactive training programs ready for them, programs that they don't have to spend 4 years in college, 2 years in college, but maybe 6 months or a year, because a lot of these people are going to be middle-aged, they got families, et cetera. They need to have a quick reboot in their lives, in their work lives. Next slide. Education, of course, what was changed with education over the last couple of years has been the entry of remote learning. Now, we've already been doing that at the university level, and we'll continue. What's different is it's been done at the K through 12 level. And I think probably some semblance of remote learning is going to stay at the K through 12 level. The problem is that K through 12 wasn't ready for this. They were told then to set up remote learning programs, and they didn't have any background in this, whereas we've had background at the university level for a decade. But there are great programs that I've seen for remote learning, great programs, interactive programs where it's able to allow a student to learn at his or her own pace. So I do think we're going to see education in some sense remade even at the K through 12 level. Next slide. Internet, if anything we learned out of the pandemic is internet is now a necessity. It's like electricity was 100 years ago. We now have $60 billion that was passed by the Congress to help expand internet throughout the country. That's not going to do it. We probably need about 200 billion, but it's a start. North Carolina General Assembly's allocated some money, but we need to have internet available everywhere in North Carolina, everywhere in the country. If you're a modern business, a modern household, you got to have reliable high-speed internet. The thing to watch, in addition to these programs I mentioned, is how will the new ways of providing the so-called low orbiting satellites that are not 25,000 miles up and only 600 miles out. Elon Musk is working on this, Bezos is working on this. Will that be the solution? Can we get widespread internet availability going that route rather than the traditional route of cables and telephone lines? Next slide. Teleworking is definitely here to stay, no question. It skyrocketed, as you can see on the numbers there during the pandemic, 8% pre-pandemic, 60% at the peak of the pandemic. Experts say it's probably going to settle around 20 to 30%. So not everyone's going to be working from home, but I think this is going to be the work mode of choice for a much larger percentage of the workforce than it was pre-pandemic. Some people love it, some people hate it. The challenge here is how are businesses going to react? Businesses are really going through a tough, especially big businesses with office space, thinking about how they're going to reimagine office space, how are they going to handle internet working or remote working, et cetera. The other thing that remote working does, if you're a business, it expands your labor pool. If you can have people work remotely, you can hire people from anywhere in the country, maybe anywhere in the world. So this is a big, big game changer in the workforce, and it's going to stay with us. Next slide. Drone delivery of packages, it's coming. We're going to have drone highways in the sky, literally, but this is coming. So instead of the van pulling up to your driveway to drop up a package, it's going to be dropped by a drone. That's going to be a big change in 2022. We're going to see this, no pun intended, take off. Next slide. And then residential relocation. Think about this. If you have someone, a family where the breadwinners are working remotely, where they can get education remotely, they get packages delivered by drone, people could live wherever they want to live. And they can particularly live in places where it's cheaper to live, where housing costs aren't as high, which is usually outside of metropolitan areas. So this could be a game changer for the revitalization of North Carolina's small town and rural regions. Next slide. Implications of all this for North Carolina. North Carolina has really come out of the pandemic looking good. We had $10 billion of new business investments announced last year. You've read about some of the headlines on this. Our population continues to expand. if you look at the metrics, for example, COVID deaths per capita, job loss per capita, we're in the lower quadrant of that. I think look for suburbs to have the fastest growth, but also the potential for growth into small towns and rural areas. And again, the next big game changer would be universally available high-speed internet. Next slide. And I'll just end this slide. Aaron already mentioned this. My new book, actually, we blew past February 22nd. It's probably going to be next month before this is out. But this is my new book that looks at how the post-pandemic world will affect families. I've always, a lot of my research has been focused on family life, how families balance work, home life, time use, et cetera. And there are going to be some big potential changes in those decisions for families in the post-pandemic lifestyle. So that's what this book is about. I'm now told it's actually going to be next month, March 29th. So anyway, look for that on Amazon and other places. And with that, I'm a few minutes past Katie and Aaron, but I'm happy to take questions.
As always, we do not mind you being a little past to give us that information. We're super grateful for your time today. Folks in our audience, we're going to take some questions here now for maybe the next 15 minutes or so. Then I'm going to share some local information, and then we can come back together for a little more Q&A. For Dr. Walden, what questions do folks have? Katie, if folks are probably dropping in the chat, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. But let me ask you, Dr. Walden, about inflation. So in terms of the last time we made a good effort at responding to this, you talked a bit about in the 1970s. Part of the challenge was believing that there was inflation led to inflation, as I understood it, people desiring to purchase. So demand goes up. Is that true? And people are wanting to get things before they get more expensive?
Oh, sure. That's an issue. And that leads to something we call wage price spiral, where if inflation is high, obviously workers realize this. They may not articulate it the way I did, but they realize this is not good for their budgets. So they go to their boss and they say, I need more wages. And actually right now, that's a good time for you to go to your boss, because businesses are worried about keeping people. So bosses maybe give their workers more money, but that increases the cost to the business, which means they have to raise their price, and that just feeds back into higher inflation. And that's a big worry that you'll hear virtually every economist talk about when we get to higher levels of inflation, that it gets ingrained in us, that we expect it, and that leads actually to higher inflation. That makes the job of the Federal Reserve even harder. That was one reason why the inflation rate in the 40 years ago, in the late 70s, early 80s, did get to double digits. We're not quite there yet, but we had a vicious wage price spiral. You could see it in the data. And it took, again, extraordinary efforts by the Federal Reserve to get inflation down, which they did, but at the cost of a recession. So yeah, this is a normal reaction by people, and it's a normal consequence that we really have to worry about.
I saw Representative Meyer post a question about the labor force. He asked it slightly differently. Let me ask, we're hearing a couple of things. One is, where did all the people go? Like, we don't understand. If employment is back up to about where it was, why are there no workers? You explained some of that is people sitting on the sidelines and not working. We've looked at the total labor force today versus how many people, what's the denominator of the fraction for unemployment. Doesn't seem that different in Orange County. Representative Meyer asked about immigration and the relationship, is the cooling of who could come into the country to work had an impact on this?
I don't have data on that yet, but one of the things that, and of course, immigration is important. I mean, there are three ways you grow the workforce. One is by adding workers through the natural process of births in a state. And the birth rate has plunged in North Carolina as well as in the country. The second way is by attracting people from outside, whether they be foreign people or people from other states. And North Carolina has been very good about attracting people from other states. In fact, last year, 2021, we ranked 4th in the country in terms of what's called net migration, number of people moving into the state from other states. This doesn't account for foreign immigration versus people moving out. So that's, and the state demographer just came out with his new forecast for population in North Carolina, and he does show it growing, and that should grow the workforce also. So we're in a much better situation in North Carolina than other states, and I think it's because of our attractiveness. And now, of course, immigration, that's a federal issue. Walden's, in my book, Real Solutions, I obviously talk about immigration. I think we need immigration. I think the question is, do we need to control it? Do we need to know who's coming in? And do we want to try to set up immigration such that we attract people that we know we need, because we have certain skills where we don't have enough workers to do that? And some would say right now we're not accomplishing that. So I think we need some further work on immigration in terms of having a plan.
Representative Meyer, if that did not answer your question, I'll come back around to it. Let me, Michael Parker, Councilmember Parker, was asking, do you see the events in Ukraine having a big impact on our economy?
Yeah. Unfortunately, woke up, I saw what everyone else saw, probably inevitable, probably expected. Well, the immediate impact is, I mean, we're already seeing the stock market go down. Stock market never likes these things. It depends. I mean, if what the experts, and I'm not an expert in this, military experts say, hey, this is going to be a 2 or 3 day event, then Russia's going to be in control. Probably the market will settle down and come back. So I'm not necessarily thinking this is long term. I think a bigger impact on the stock market is going to be what the Federal Reserve does. I think the immediate impact, of course, we're going to see in commodity markets, particularly oil. We've already seen oil prices go up. Probably not much we can do about that. Again, what we can hope for, it's a short-term event. The result, we know what the result is going to be. Russia's going to control Ukraine probably through a puppet government, but that'll settle things down. I mean, what the markets are worried about, and I'm sort of cringe when I read some headline today, is this the start of World War III? I mean, certainly we hope not. But I mean, there's always that possibility that there'll be some confrontation between US forces and Russian forces. We now have forces, American soldiers in the Baltic countries, which are part of NATO. That's just right near Ukraine and Belarus. So I think that's what's being priced into some of these movements, that there's always this uncertainty is never good for markets. And there's always the potential, even though it might be low, for something really, really, really catastrophic. I'm not saying that what's happening in Ukraine is not catastrophic, but I'm in terms of something wider. I think that's what the markets are really concerned about.
Matt Gladdick, will you unmute yourself and ask your question? Matt's the director of the Chapel Hill Downtown Partnership.
Good morning, Mike Walden, longtime listener, first-time caller. I'm really curious, specifically for Chapel Hill, how complex our housing market is. And with work from home increasing, we've seen increased sales tax revenue. But what is the future of Chapel Hill, where it's really difficult to build housing? We're growing very little because of how little housing is being built. And what is the future for our office market that we're trying to get off the ground? What is the opportunity for the future, and what are the risks?
Well, I think office market, I think housing market. I mean, Chapel Hill, of course, revolves around the university. The university has great reputation. They're having a great fundraising campaign. So I expect UNC Chapel Hill will continue to grow, continue to have status, et cetera, have more programs. I mean, housing, if you look at residential housing prices, in fact, the other day, I think it was for Raleigh, showed that prices in Raleigh were the last average price of a house in Raleigh is on up 30, I think it was 36 or 38% in the last year. It's unbelievable. And of course, again, things all come down to supply and demand. People are moving here. People want to live here. It's hard to quickly build new housing. Plus, then you have the debates with zoning, et cetera. Do we want to chop up half-acre lots to smaller lots? What kind of housing do you want to complement the other housing? I mean, there are all kinds of regulatory issues that go into play here, which obviously elected officials have to work out. It's not really for an economist to say. But that is one of the issues. Now, if remote work really takes off, that'll mitigate some of that, because people won't have to live close to where they work, close to downtown Chapel Hill, close to university. They can live farther out. But then that could adversely affect your commercial sales in Chapel Hill. So a lot of issues that are intertwined here, and it's hard to find a solution that satisfies everyone. But I think step one is to understand what are the forces at work. And I think the big force at work here is the triangle is just such an attractive area that people want to live in. So that's bringing people in, it's bringing investors in, it's bringing new businesses in. And all of that's trying to squeeze into limited amounts of space, particularly when you want the space around the big institutions that people want to be close to, and that causes prices to go up.
Well, Matt, that was a great comment. Folks probably know, Chapel Hill pre-pandemic daytime population was 85,000, nighttime population was 55,000. So 30,000 people coming in and buying and engaging and shopping. When you're working from home, that's very different, which is why we saw Chatham County retail sales go through the roof. Dr. McTighe with SBTDC, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to ask your question, and then Desiree Goldman.
All right, thank you. Really quickly, could you speak to us about, for the concept of inflation as a macroeconomic concept, right? You stated it, I think it was about 7.4. Is there, as an economist, do you also look at that at the micro level? And if so, how does that look in the Chapel Hill area, or is that just not a possibility, or how do you measure that?
There aren't individual measures of inflation for localities that, like Raleigh or Chapel Hill. We don't have official measures of inflation. Maybe that's something the chamber might want to take up, but it's a laborious process because the federal government collects data each month from tens of thousands of outlets and tens of thousands of products, and they weight them by how important they are in the consumer's budget, et cetera. I might also say that even when the overall inflation rate is low, like 1 or 2%, you're always going to have changes in individual markets that are different than that. And individual markets go through their own individual supply and demand. So I was on a call yesterday where someone said, well, Walden, you said this inflation rate is 7.5%, but I know about this product XYZ is going up 36%. How come the overall is 7.5? Well, because that product is one of tens of thousands of products. And when you put it in the average, that 36% gets muted. I have no reason to think that overall inflation is that different than the 7.5, but that's the national level here in North Carolina or in the Triangle or in Chapel Hill. But no, we don't have individual measures at that micro level.
Here's Dr. Walden, here's what we do have though. So there's the consumer price index is national, but there is a cost of living index, which is a chamber staffer every quarter going out into the community and pricing grocery store items, the cost of a yoga hour, the cost of a chiropractic session, the cost of eggs, the cost of gas. And we have just begun re-engaging in that quarterly collection so that we can maybe report some of that back locally on whether we're seeing price changes here different than other places.
Yeah, what I meant to say is we don't have, in terms of the federal collection and the official measures, we don't have them down to the micro section. But you're right, there are actually several services around the country that do attempt to measure an inflation or better a cost of living index for a state or locality. And you can, apparently you're doing that in Chapel Hill, and I applaud you for doing that.
Desiree Goldman, and then over to Lori Palachuk.
Hi, I'm a 23-year realtor here in Orange County and Chapel Hill. So I've known a compressed market forever, and yet something has changed. And what it, from what I see, and talking more on a national level, is with the not building houses for the 5 years during the recessions and the millennials now being at incomes and don't even have children yet, the amount of wanting to buy houses, we have a major housing issue in the country. And it's really, and if you look at our zoning and regulations and how we build, it's still pretty much 19th century, 20th century kind of foundational thinking. What is it going to take? Both on a local level, since we have local officials, state, national level, we really need to have a big idea conversation about what is housing now in the future, and what's going to be both eco-efficient, maximize land use, all of that, because we keep doing it from a 19th century paradigm.
Well, you're absolutely right. Zoning is a big deal in this. Local zoning can be changed here in Raleigh, where I live. Zoning has been changed in most neighborhoods to where you cannot mandate, say, quarter acre or half an acre lots. You can go in and build housing on a tenth of an acre, and that's pretty well pervasive across the city. And that was a decision by the city council. So you have to follow up with Chapel Hill to make those kinds of changes. One thing that I think there would also be value to have discussion about is the methods of building. construction is done, you talk about 19th century, building a house is pretty much the same as it's always been also since the 19th century. And a lot of localities don't like what's called factory built housing, where the house is built in a factory somewhere where it can be done more efficiently and less costly, and then move to the site. They want it built on site, stick built. And that incurs some additional costs. So that's another thing that could be discussed and debated. And thirdly, the options for people to have housing. There have been some who've said we need to go back to the old boarding room housing, where you have families that maybe have limited income, they can't afford to have their own house, they can't afford necessarily have their own apartment, where they have their own bedrooms and bath, but they share common areas. And that is a way of reducing housing costs, particularly for limited income households. But those boarding room houses have largely been banned in many cities. That might be another option to think about.
Lori Palicelli, and then over to John Perry.
Good morning, Dr. Walden. Thank you so much. You're right in that hotels and restaurant businesses are starting to come back, but we're very reliant on the corporate business traveler. We're very reliant on those business travel markets midweek. What are you seeing in terms of corporations, association, government, university, allowing those business meetings and business travel to come back?
Well, I'm optimistic, but it's all dictated by the virus. I mean, the virus has really been in control of the economy for now going on 3 years. If we are, as some experts think, medical experts, when it emphasizes medical experts, not me talking, if we are on the downside of the virus, even if we get another mutation, it's still rather muted. It's not, it's not deadly like the earlier versions were. Hopefully we're on the downside. And if that's the case, I look for more relaxation. I think there's a big pent up desire by people, and you probably know this, everyone, to get back to normal. So I think if we can get back to normal because the medical situation is safe, I think we'll get there rather quickly. So I would look for meetings and travel to come back actually like gangbusters once we get to a situation where we feel safe.
Thank you.
John Perry, would you like to ask your question about housing and about expectations with the huge job influx? And then go ahead, John.
Hey, Michael, thanks for your insights. We've all seen huge escalations in our real estate values, and I was just curious with the potential raising of interest rates, that might curb things a little bit, but then all of a sudden, you know that you've got Google and Apple and all these other industries moving to our area. How will the interest rates sort of curb that, or how do you see that playing out?
Well, higher interest rates obviously have an adverse effect on the ability of people to buy homes. So I think that effect in alone would be negative. But I don't think that means the housing market in the triangle is going to go backwards because of what you said. So I do think that the pace of home buying and the escalation of housing prices will be muted due to the Federal Reserve's policy of interest rate hikes this year. And so what that means is we need to be, you and others like you who deal in markets where financing is important, need to closely watch what the Federal Reserve does. Right now, Federal Reserve effective interest rates are zero. They were 2.5% before the pandemic. There's some economists who say they're going to have to go up to maybe 5% in order to squeeze out inflation. So watch the rate hikes. The Federal Reserve, they're not going to do all this at once. They meet every other month. They're going to do some rate hikes next month, and they're going to come back 2 months after that, probably do other rate hikes. Watch the pace, because that's obviously going to have an impact on the cost of borrowing and what that means to home buying. But I think home buying in the triangle is still going to go up. It's just not going to go up as fast with these rate hikes.
Because of limited time, I'm curating some of the questions now rather than ask them in order. I'm going to ask one more, then I'm going to share a little bit about what local businesses are saying, and then we'll come back to some Q&A. Karina, would you like to ask your question? And then Representative Meyer had commented on it. You were asking about the impact of substituting technology for automation and what impact that might have on unemployment.
Yes, if more businesses move towards that as a solution to their labor supply issues, do you foresee a rise in the unemployment rate?
Well, I see more disruption in the labor market, and hopefully what's going to happen is, yes, the the economists worried about 5 or 6 years ago, we were worried about all this new technology. We're going to have massive unemployment. Now the thought is it actually might be our savior with respect to a smaller labor supply. So what I think is going to happen is, yes, we're going to see more automation, more technology being employed by businesses in place of people. But I do think there are going to be other jobs created so that on paper, we can have the same level of employment. The trick is going to be, the challenge is going to be taking a person who has lost their job. Let's say they were working in a restaurant and they were doing restaurant things and they don't have any other skills, taking that person and moving them to a tech firm where they might do coding or something else. They're going to have new training. So that's why I think a big challenge, and I can't emphasize this enough, that we need to make sure that we have in place institutions and programs that are going to fill in that gap and be able to move people from one type of occupation to another. And I really think the state needs, and this is no criticism of the state because I think the state has a lot of efforts in this area, but I think we need to go to the next level and really be proactive and recognize where people are losing their jobs, what kind of occupations are being downsized, and then reaching out to those people and saying, here are some jobs that maybe you might be interested in, and here are the ways that you get retrained to do that. We may even need to help people with relocation, because oftentimes the jobs that are being created are in another area of the state, metropolitan areas, whereas a lot of the rural jobs are leaving, and be able to help those people move. So I think we need to be not only have the programs available, but be proactive in making sure people can take part in those programs.
Thank you.
Let me move to some information that we have been gathering, and then we can come back to some questions. Hopefully, all right. People nod if you see the big rather than all my notes. So on an annual basis, the Chamber has been conducting a survey of local businesses. It is non-scientific. It is a voluntary survey, but it's been non-scientific and voluntary of a similar cohort for 15 years. So while it may not be telling us what an economist might say about it, but we've been asking the same people over time, and seeing how that has trended, I think helps us a lot. The folks that answered the questions are about a third, 1 to 5 employees. You see 40% of them, 6 to 50, and then 17% more than 50. So very reflective of our small business community. The first one we asked is, how has the current state of the economy affected your organization? This is the amount of people reporting negatively. So we began this survey right after or in the recession. So 2008, 2009, 56% of the small businesses in this community, Chamber members, were reporting that it was having a real negative impact. And then the economy got better, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Now, we did our survey in February of the month before lockdown. So the data that you guys are going to see here is what happened. The 4% was people the month before we sent things into lockdown, saying that the state of the economy was not having a negative effect. But then 32%. Now that 32%, as you can tell, is not as high as it was folks really reporting negative economic impact. We asked what percent, do you say positively impacting you? Nobody thought the economy was positively impacting their business. Back then, people felt very good about our economy as we were asking this question every February. Again, this is the February just before the pandemic. Nobody thought, well, very few, 28%. But that is back up. There's much more optimism you're going to see from this local business community now, 38% reporting that the state of the economy is positively impacting their business. This is a set of businesses that don't seem to be affected by what's going on generally in the economy, folks reporting a neutral impact. So what those things look like if we put them all together over time. It's about the economy. We also asked them, well, let's disaggregate that by type of enterprise. So there are 17 different categories of businesses that we have asked, and this is how they were reporting. A 10 was it was very positively, a 1 was it was very negatively, not surprising, personal services, hair, fitness, nail. This is in 2021. I'm going to show you the 2022 in just a second. Accommodations was the worst. They were giving us a full 1, but you'll see on real estate, professional services, development, on the high end. Let's take a look at just having asked it this month, 2 weeks ago. The average is better, right? 4.7. Now it is the case that every group is reported except for 3. Or I guess it's, so in the previous one, 15 different segments said it was worse rather than better. And in this one, only 5 of the segments say that it is negatively impacting their business or that it is neutral. Still, its accommodations feeling much better. If you take a look at that food service and drinking places, yes, that's the name of the category. They were at a 2 before and now reporting a 4.9, right? Feeling pretty much neutral about how the economy, things are getting much better there. We also asked to see whether different size businesses are feeling worse or better, and they generally are feeling the same about how this economy is impacting their business. Again, this is 103 local. Do you expect your sales to increase or decrease over the next 12 months? 76% of them are expected to increase. Only 2% are expecting to decrease. Now, how would they feel today? This is 2 weeks ago, and Ukraine was a little bit different, but still feeling very positive. But that's what they always say. We're like 76% think sales are going up. Well, no kidding. Right? It seems like we have a super optimistic set of businesses since we've been asking this question since 2016. You don't see a lot of difference over time. We plan to add or reduce workers over the next 12 months. 68% are planning to add workers. We've got 31% with no plans at all, and only 1% planning to reduce their workforce over the next 12 months, which speaks to the problem of finding the workers to do that work. So this is how that has changed over time. This is an all-time high of the local business community reporting that they plan to add workers. Where we find them, what wages will we need to pay them, how far will they commute, will be some of the challenges that we're going to face. We're going to send this out to you all, and you'll get the recording so you can listen again to Dr. Walden and see some of this data. Would you say, we've asked this for years, would you say local government here is pro-business, neutral, or anti-business? For the local government people on the call, this is one of your highest favorabilities that you've ever gotten. You should certainly hope so, having pushed millions of dollars of money into small businesses' hands. But we saw an improvement and a decline in the folks thinking that local government here is somewhat or very anti-business, very positive, positive reputation. I'll move on from that. We asked 3 words. How would you describe your organization's current financial condition? These are a wonderful set of words about what is going on. I'm taking time to read through these sort of 3 comments. We'll be sharing these with each of our economic development partners. But the top words are stable, good, strong, steady, struggling, growing, improving, and growth. Those are the most frequent words of the 300 words submitted to us about their current financial condition. We asked about their outlook, and their outlook is equally positive, feeling good, hopeful, optimistic. So those top words were positive, optimistic, hopeful, cautious, cautiously optimistic, strong, growth, and good. We did ask, we're not going to share this with you right now, but we'll be combing through this again and sharing this with policy and decision makers. Other than ending the pandemic, what does your organization need to be successful in 2022? Some of the key things were about people. We need workers, we need more business. We have some supply chain challenges. Employees were some of the top things. We asked if we could change one thing locally to help your organization thrive. What would it be? We also asked, what would you like us to do as your chamber to help you thrive in 2022? And those are really going to help shape what we're doing for the local business community. And again, sharing with our partners. We've created a new survey. This was just chamber members. The town of Chapel Hill-Carrboro, Hillsborough, the county, Downtown Partnership will all be deploying a revised survey. It has a couple more questions in it. What resources do you need to be successful in the next 6 months? What's the most significant challenge to your future growth? We'll be using these to help set some of that policy about where we're going to spend ARPA funds, how we should be applying our staff time to supporting organizations. If you get the survey twice, if you already did the chambers and you get this other one, please fill it out also. It has a few more different questions. If you get it from multiple sources over the next 2 weeks, we ask you to just fill out one of them, but it means a lot to us, and we really appreciate if you would take time to complete them both. So let me back out of sort of that whirlwind comment on data, but the summary for me, having read through it, there's key things that folks need. Generally feeling optimistic, concerned about employee acquisition, customer acquisition, needing support with technical assistance, needing some help with marketing, needing some help in business planning now that they have made it through this, right? They've navigated their way through this crisis. They're preparing to emerge on the other side. And rather than crisis prevention, now what are we going to do as we come out of this chrysalis of self-defense and think about what our growth and expansion strategies are going to be? All right, so a little local flavor into the macroeconomics. Let me roll back to some of the questions that folks had. Well, let me ask you, Dr. Walden, you've now 3 years, the third time you've seen our local version of this. Any reflections or incongruity between what the local businesses we asked are saying?
Oh, no, I think I'm very impressed that you do that. And no, I think the questions you ask are right on. The answers make sense depending on the state of the economy, and there's more optimism now, as you saw in the answers you received. I'm also impressed by the question I've gotten from the participants in this group. So Chapel Hill is lucky to have a dedicated, intelligent group of businesses and people focused on the business community. So I'm honored to participate.
Well, we're grateful to have you. Katie will be booking your next year's appointment here shortly when we conclude in the next 12 minutes. All right, I'm looking for a few other questions that were there. Dustin Miller, are you still with us? Would you unmute and ask your question? And then I've got one, and then I'm rolling to Leslie McAdams. Mr. Miller, are you able to unmute yourself and ask? All right, while Leslie prepares to unmute herself, I'm going to ask you on the inflation question, but what prevents us from going the way of Venezuela? Like what don't they have to stop wild, crazy inflation that we have? What confidence can you give us that's not where we're headed?
Well, I think we're much more sensitive to the inflation rate. I mean, 7.5% obviously is not our all-time high. We were about twice that level 40 years ago, but people are very resistant. I think there's also a sense that high inflation rates are not good for the economy for a variety of reasons. And we have an institution, the Federal Reserve. Actually, Congress wrote the charter for the Federal Reserve, and they've given the Federal Reserve two major tasks in terms of operating their policy. Develop policy that does two things. One, that moves us toward full employment, and secondly, that keeps prices relatively stable. And the Federal Reserve has interpreted the latter by about a 2% inflation rate. They think that's probably the optimal level. So I think we have a mandate for reasonable inflation institutionalized in our government in the form of the Federal Reserve. I don't know that much about Venezuela other than their economic numbers have not been good the last couple of years, but at least in our country, we have an institutional mandate for low inflation, and we get pushback from people when we do have high inflation. And given our form of government and given the ability of people to speak, that's probably heard more here than it might be in a country like Venezuela.
It's helpful. Leslie McAdams, what question do you have for Dr. Walden?
I actually was having probably a side conversation in the chat, which other people answered. So I had just posted that has the university ever considered doing a senior college, something, more than just special interest or continuing education, but something akin to like almost a minor program. I had heard a podcast that Wall Street Journal runs called Best New Ideas in Money, where they did a whole spot on how we're all living to 100 now. In a lot of professions, you just simply physically cannot do, past your 40s, whatever, physical labor, what have you. So, kind of beyond retraining, just because we're being, technology is changing. We need retraining just because, our physical abilities are changing. And it was an interesting concept to think about, going back to college, having a specific program to go back to college for an entirely new phase of life. And people have answered that there are retraining programs, but the concept that they had proposed in this podcast was actually a little bit more intense than just a retraining.
That's if I can take that, that's a really interesting point. The forecast for labor force participation actually suggests that people over age 55's labor force participation is going to go up in future years. And you merge that with the fact that people over 55, their composition in the economy and in the population is going to grow, whereas younger people are going to decline. This all leads to older workers being much more important in the workforce. And I think your point is very well taken, that maybe universities like the one I worked for 43 years might want to think about developing programs and majors and training for people over a certain age. I think that's a fabulous idea. And it might actually come to fruition, because with the number of younger people not growing as much, the young people, sort of the 18 to 22 cohort that universities relied on, they're not going to be as big a part of the economy as they used to be, whereas old people are going to be a bigger part. So this might happen naturally, not just because it's a good idea for the workforce. It might happen naturally because universities will find they need more students, and they might go to older people. So I think that's an absolutely fabulous idea. I think you should run with that.
Well, it turns out I'm actually a real estate developer, and I specialize in senior communities. And I will tell you, as part of looking at this, we build in community space, because there's a lot of entrepreneurialism for senior, in the senior population. There are people who have retired and they just kind of pick up hobbies and create whole businesses out of it. So this would be so some of that movement is already happening. The education piece is a little bit out of my lane, since I'm all real estate all the time, but I do think about this in context of, how it influences design in.
There's nothing to prevent, again, I can only speak for NC State, there's nothing to prevent an older person from enrolling at NC State and getting a degree. We do have the OLLI program. I can't remember what OLLI stands for, but they're standalone courses, doesn't lead to a degree. But I think what you're suggesting is that maybe universities might want to think about special programs, special degrees, special educational paths for older people, because quite frankly, we're different than people 18 to 22. Not that we can't be in the classroom together, but we're different. So
I went to business school, and I can.
I can't tell you how much that is a very exciting point, a very excellent point.
So in our final comments, I do want to, Jennifer Player asked a great question. She's the CEO of our local habitat chapter. And her question was about wages and whether or not you're seeing folks pay our wages. It's not just, well, Jennifer, would you like to ask your question? It both had to do with the hybrid workforce wages and compensated employees for their use of their home, I guess, as an office.
Yeah, that's essentially the question, is that if the hybrid and remote workforce is here to stay, is, what are you seeing? I work for, Aaron said, a small nonprofit. I think for small businesses and nonprofits, expecting someone to work from home or offering that option, and then having them increase internet costs and printing costs, those types of things. So just curious what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I don't have any data on that, but I certainly think that's a valid point for a remote worker to make to their company, to say, look, I incur these costs, the one that you mentioned. Now the employer might come back and say, yeah, but you're saving money on commuting. So it might be that you have to sort of develop a balance there and propose. But again, it's a worker's market right now. Any of these issues, if you are a new remote worker and you're worried about, this is a time to bring them forth, because businesses are in the mood right now to please workers, especially good workers.
Dr. Walden, my final question to you, and then I'm going to bounce to Katie for some wrapping up comments. If you were a small business coach, if they were seeking you one-on-one for a little bit of advice, do you have one or two things based on what you see coming in the next year that you would be advising them to do?
Well, immediately I would advise them to certainly be optimistic in this market, as your survey showed that, and this is a growing market, the Triangle, North Carolina is in total. So this is a great place to be if you're an entrepreneur, if you're striking out new. But for this year, I would have in my back pocket, what if things slow down considerably? What if we have a short recession at the end of the year? Make sure you have plans to do that. So that's my immediate recommendation. Have plans for the worst case scenario. If the worst case scenario happens, I think it'll be short-lived, but I think there is a possibility that we may see a much different economy at the end of the year while inflation is being wrung out of the economy.
Dr. Walden, as always, absolutely wonderful to have you.
My pleasure.
We'll leave this Zoom open for folks if they want to have conversations with each other after we formally adjourn at the 10 o'clock hour to see if folks want to continue a little longer conversation. Katie Lewis, will you help bring us to conclusion?
Thanks, Aaron. Well, that was terrific. Well done. I hope everyone here was able to capture some key insights that'll help you make sense of our economy and also help you make some risk-adjusted decisions for your business going forward. I want to give a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Michael Walden and to Aaron Nelson, who both prepared outstanding presentations. And I want to thank our sponsors who made today's forum possible, including Chapel Hill Media Group, Durham Tech, ServPro of South Durham and Orange counties, and the Small Business and Technology Development Center, SBTDC. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we will send you, everyone who registered today will get a link to the video of today's discussion. So you can go back and watch it again and continue to make sense of all this important information. And friendly reminder, Dr. Walden and Aaron Nelson will be speaking today on 97.9 The Hill at 4:30 for a radio hit with Brighton McConnell. They're going to talk about the top takeaways from today. Now, as we bring it in for a landing, I know there were several questions still in the queue. And so I believe Aaron is able to stick around for a few more minutes. We'll keep this Zoom open for maybe continued discussion. And Dr. Walden, if you're interested and available, maybe to stick around a few more minutes. If you have another appointment, we understand. But we'll stop the recording, adjourn our meeting, and then we can carry on for a few. Our next forum, these critical issues series cover, as you can tell, really important topics. And our next one is the Candidates and Elected Officials Forum. It's going to be on April 28th. It's going to be virtual. And the timing is good because our primary elections got postponed. And so this will swoop in right before you're going to the voting booth. So join us for that. Also, as you know, if you'd like to learn more about our chamber and become a member, please go to carolinachamber.org or reach out to us. So with that, we're adjourned.